Okay, welcome everyone. As we welcome in Aaron Swade, Irving Fishbaum, Chaim Lerner, Mark Frankel, Baruch Ian, Yitzi Muller, Saba, Rabbi Kranz, Nachman Chaplin, Mordechai Sultan, Shalom Fogel, Mo Kushner, good to see you, Mo, Dr. Block, Dr. Guy, Moshe Lehman, Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg, Shelley Zeitlin, Elia Shutman, and it's good to have Itchy Weintraub. It's good to have you. We have over here Reb Moshe Jackman, Reb Kramer, Gedalia Engel, Reb Goldstein, David Helfgott on Kol HaLashon. As we learn with the tefillah that all children should get into school simply, easily, with ne'imus, without aggravation and heartache. So we're holding Ela Masnisen, 4 lines from the bottom of Mem Aleph and Beis. Ela Masnisen de Ketani, Misha Chetzia Eved v'Chetzia Ben Chayrin. Now remember, we were having a question if you could free just half a slave, whether you could do it with kesef or with a shtar or neither. So here it says in the Mishnah it's possible to have somebody who's half a slave, half a ben chayrin. So it seems to be that you could free half. So Bishloim el Rabba, according to Rabba, Mukim Kesef, Rabba holds, everybody holds that you could do it with money because the pasuk says by the Shifcha Charufa V'Haftei Lo Niftasa. V'Haftei, she's redeemed but not completely redeemed. Elul Rav Yosef, but according to Rav Yosef, who holds that according to the Rabbanan, both Kesef and Shtar cannot be half, so then would you have to say Lema Rebbe, the Mishnah is only going according to Rebbe, V'loi Rabbanan. Ravina says, no, Eved shel Shnei Shutfin. It's talking about Eved belonging to 2 partners. It belonged to Gedalia and Reb Kramer. And Gedalia freed all of his. The only question is if you could free half of what you have. But in the case where Gedalia frees all that he possesses, then everybody holds. But everybody holds that way. Amar Rabba says, where there is a machlokes whether you could do things halfway, b'machloikes b'sheshikra chetziyah v'haniach chetziyah, where Gedalia tries to free half the slave and keep half the slave. But if he vacates the slave entirely from his possession, just in 2 different steps, aval shichrer chetziyah u'macher chetziyah, where he frees half and sells half, so he's giving away the whole slave. He frees half and gives half as a gift. Kaven de kanofik minei kule, since the slave is completely leaving from his rishus, divra kolkan. Everybody holds that works. So the Gemara Abaya questions this assertion of Rabbah. Says the Gemara, Amalei Abaya ubet kuloi loy pligi, as we welcome in Richard Rosenzweig joining us. Amalei Abaya bekuloi loy pligi. They don't argue where it's the whole slave. V'atani chada. Now we're going to learn 2 brises over here that contradict each other, and we're going to try to reconcile them in many different ways. Says the Gemara, "Ubekuloi like pligi v'atani chada." Let's say Gedalia has 2 slaves. He has Tony and Jack. And we have Yisrael Fisher from not Manhattan, not St. Louis, not Borough Park, from Tannersville. And we have Mel Zachter from Staten Island. Says the Gemara, you wanted to maintain and welcome Mel, welcome Rabbi Yisrael, 5 lines from top of Daf Mem Beis. By the way, Mem Beis is a very, very significant number. It's interesting that the Oitzer Atfilah says that the bracha of Parnasa, Baruch Aleinu, starts with a Beis and ends with a Mem. Because it's Baruch Aleinu, so it starts with a Beis. And Baruch Atah Hashem Mevarech Hashanim, it ends with a Mem. So the Malzer Kolba says that's because when it comes to Parnasa, we invoke the Shem Shel Mem Beis Oisius. Now, I'm not, so familiar with the Shem of Mem Beis Oisius. We need somebody that's esoterically connected, but maybe Yitzi will look it up and give you all kinds of details. But I'm not that. It's beyond my pay scale to know much about it. But that's what the Mazer Kolbai says. But the Oitzer Atfilah says simply that it starts with a Beis because Torah Shebikstav starts with a Beis, Bereshis, and it ends with a Mem because Torah Shebal Peh starts with a Mem. Bracha starts with Mei Mosai. So that's V'dibarta Bum. The Ran says the mitzvah Asay Daraisa of Limud HaTorah is from the pasuk V'dibarta Bum. Bum is Beis is Bereshis, that's Torah Shebiksav, and Mem is Mei Mosai, that's Torah Shebal Peh. And we know that with schus of the learning, we could ask for a good parnasa, because parnasa ain't Torah, ain't Kemach. So anyway, Mem Beis is for all the good bums out there. You notice how Shelley comes on the shir and he just has this look. He always looks the same when he comes on the shir. It's really interesting. He's very riveted into the shir. It almost looks like a picture. So, are you telling me that where Gedalia vacates the entire slave, it works, even if he does it in 2 parts? He frees half and he sells half. He frees half and gives half as a gift. Vatani Chada, we learned in one brisa. Now, as I was telling you, Gedalia in his stable, not many people in Fairways have a stable. He has a stable. I don't know if he's aware of it, but you don't see what's behind these houses. So in his stable, he has 2 slaves, Tony and Ike. So he writes his estate to Tony and Ike. So what does that accomplish? So Tony gets half of himself and half of Ike, and Ike gets half of himself and half of Tony. So Kanu they acquire, and they free one another. V'tanya Yidach, we learned in another brisa, ha'aymer kol nechasav nesunin leploini u'leploini avdai. If he says all my estate should be given to Tony and Ike, my servants, af atzman loikanu. Not only don't they get the estate, they don't get themselves. Once they don't get themselves, they don't get their estate, because kol masha kana evet kana rabbi. So my love, what it must be, her Rebbe who holds that you could free in half. So he holds that it works. Harabanan, he holds that you can't free in half. That's even where he gives away both halves. Unlike what you said, even if he gives away both halves, but if he does it in halves, it doesn't work. Says Gemara, Aidi v'Aidi Rabbanan. Hadamar Kulai. One is where he says to both of them, I'm giving you all my estate, and hands them simultaneously both a document that I'm giving the whole estate. And when he's giving it all away, that works. Hadamar Chatzi Chatzi, where he says half and half. So first of all, where he gives one half, and then later on he gives to the other half, it doesn't work, because when he gives first one half, just to give away half, we said doesn't work. Secondly, the Taisus Harash says, and he learns that that's Pshat and Rashi, when he gives one half and then he gives the other half, he could maintain, I gave you both the same half. And if you give them both the same half, they didn't acquire themselves fully, so they don't get anything. Says the Gemara, but wait a second. If he says half and half, that in the Reisha of both parts of the Reisha, it's talking, in the Reisha when it says, it's talking about the whole thing, where he gives to both of them the whole thing, and yet it says in the second brayse he doesn't go free. Says, well, no, Pirushe Kamafarish. It's explanatory. Af atzman loikanu. They don't acquire even themselves. Why? Because to each one he gave the same half. And this is going according to the Rabbanan, that you just can't give away half. Right? Even both by kesef and by shtar, you can't give away half. Keitzad, kegain da amar chatzi chatzi. And hachanami mistavra. The isok tridaitach reisha da amar kulai, that Reisha says that even if he says he's giving away all of the slave to each one, they don't acquire their freedom. Hashta amar kulai loikanu, amar chatzi chatzi mibai. If he says half and half, is it a question? So the Gemara says, well, that wouldn't be really a proof. It won't be a question of why it has to say both, because maybe Tani Sefer Ligluye Reisha. It says in the Sefer Chatzi Chatzi to reveal that the Reisha is talking about even where he says Kulai. Shaloi Taimer Reisha Dama Chatzi Chatzi Avraham Kulai. But if he says simultaneously to both of them, I'm giving all of you Kanu. So Tana Sefer Dama Chatzi Chatzi, which reveals that the Reisha is talking about Kulai. Mechlal the Reisha Dama Kulai Vafilu Hachi Lai Kanu. So that's one shot in reconciling the two brises. The Iba is saying, Malay Kasha, kan bishtar echad, kan bishnei shtaris. Where does it say that if he writes to his two slaves, it's talking about where he writes in one document that he's giving everything to Tony and Ike? That doesn't work. Because we learn out from get. Lala, we learn out from get. Just like by get, you cannot divorce two women with one get. So here too also you can't free two slaves with one shtar. Kan b'shnei shtaros. If there's two shtaros, then it works. So the Gemara says, but if it's talking about with one shtar, what's the difference if he said chatzi chatzi, even if he said kulai, it wouldn't work. B'shtar echad, if it's one shtar, my area chatzi chatzi, what's the difference if he said half and half? Afilu ay mekulay nami loikanu. Because we said the svara that just like two women you can't divorce with one shtar, you can't free two slaves with one shtar. Says Gemara, yeah, that's what it means. Hachanami kama af atzman loikanu, they don't acquire themselves. Bamed b'shtar echad, avo b'shnei shtaros, by two documents kanu. However, even by two documents, that's only if he said to each one kulai. But v'imamar chatzi chatzi, if he said to each one half, he might be giving to both of them the same half. Then af b'shnei shtaris nami loikano. The Iba is saying, I told you we're going to have a lot of different ways to reconcile these two brises. The Iba is saying, Loikasha, kan bebas achas, kan beze achazeh. One is talking about where he gives them simultaneously the two shtaros. So if he gives them simultaneously the two shtaros, and he says to both of them that they acquire everything, so then they acquire everything, and they free each other. Kan beze achazeh. If it's one after another, so the second one definitely doesn't get anything because he already gave it all to the first one. So the Gemara then asks, but why do we say that both of them don't acquire themselves? The first one should acquire himself. The first one already acquired. He should acquire himself. He should acquire himself, Tony. And he should also acquire Ike. That pshat doesn't work. It's better like the two other pshat. Finally, Ravashi says, you know the brisa that says they both don't go free? That's because Gedalia said, Kol nechasai nesunin leploini avdai. All my estate I give to Tony and Ike, my slaves. And since he still calls them his slaves, he's revealing that he really doesn't want to free them. That's what Ravashi wants to suggest. Ravashi Amishani Hosam de Kokaralu Avdai. He's calling them my slaves. So Amalei Rafram Ravashi Vidilma Avdai Shahoyu Kfar. Maybe he meant my former slaves. I mean, after all, Miloi Tanan, didn't we learn? We've had this quoted a lot in Shas. HaKoisev kol nechasav la'avdai. If Gedalia writes all of his estate to his servant Tony, Yatza l'cheres. So then Tony goes free and he acquires the estate. Shayir karka kolshu. If Gedalia says, I'm giving everything to Tony except for a piece of land. So there we say that he doesn't get any land, because since he said except for a piece of land and he didn't specify it, which one, so he doesn't get any of it. And since he said kol nechasav, and it's obviously not true because he's getting none of the karka, so we say that he was shayir also for himself, Tony as well, and lo yatsa l'cheres. Reb Shimon Aimer, no, he just kept the karka. He didn't say anything about the slave. The slave will go free. All of my estate should be given to Tony, except for 1/10,000. So maybe he was saying, I'm giving him everything except for he himself, who I only consider 1/10,000. And if he doesn't give the slave his freedom, then the slave gets nothing. But it's only if he says except for 1/10,000. But if he didn't say, he said, I'm giving everything to Pliny Avdi, he would go free, even though he called him Avdi. He's calling him an Eved. Ella Avdi Shaya Kvar. It means my former Eved. Hachanami Avdi Shaya Kvar. So therefore, we don't like Rav Ashi's interpretation either. Very technical Gemara, Rabbi is saying. Very technical Gemara. Itchy is looking at me like, this is why I had to come tonight? Hitchy, it's good to see your smiling face. I think you're looking a little younger. Are you taking any special medicines?
Exercising.
Exercise pickleball?
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. Anyway, now we are just getting underway. 5 lines from the bottom of Membe Zamad Aleph. By the way, I tracked down Marshall Castle, and he's now in Wisconsin. I'm telling you, if I had a penny for all these excuses, I'd be a rich man.
You mentioned about why it begins with base, right? Why it starts with base.
Yeah.
I heard the good time. Now, Menitzka mentioned from the Shem Tov that before you start learning Torah, Hashem doesn't look how much Torah you learn. Main things are Munz Hashem. You can't start with our, because Echad, Hashem is the Echad. He's the one who made the Torah, and the child, before you give him food, you have to give him formula, other thing. Same thing, until you start learning Torah, you have to learn the other things. And to teach Amunus Hashem, then you can learn your Torah. That's why it starts with base.
Excellent. You hear what Sab is saying. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Kol sheyir asay kodemes lechachmasay, chachmasay miskayemes. So before you could learn and have atzlacha in Torah, there has to be yira first. So you have to have the aleph of the Eibishter, and then you could start with the bays of Torah. The Gemara tells us 5 lines from the bottom of Daf Mem Beis. We'll learn for Avigdor Aryeh ben Rivka. Should have a refuah shalema b'serek she'echa l'Yisrael. So here's the situation where Saba and I own a slave, Tony. I free Tony. So he's Matisyo now / Tony. So Matisyo works for himself on even days, and he works for Saba on the odd days. Now the din is that if an ox that's a muad gores a slave and kills him, so you have to pay a knas to the owner, regardless of the value of the slave. You pay a knas of 30 shkolim. If he's a free man, you have to pay kaifer. A muad pays kaifer, which is the value of the person, much more than 30 shkolim. So the Gemara now says, Nokush shar, if, let's say, this was a shar that's owned himself on the even days and for Saba on the odd days. Nokhu shar yoim shel rabbi, if the shar goes him on the odd days, the rabbi, then you have to pay 30 shkalim to Saba. Yoim shel atzmai, if he goes him on his day, on the even days, la'atzmai, then you have to pay kaifer to him. Says Gemara, what does that mean? El miyati yom shel rabba yisu shivcha. On the day that he works for Saba, he can marry a shivcha, and yom shel atzma, on the day that he works for himself, yisu bas chayrin. So the Gemara says, isura like kamrina. We're not talking about iser. Obviously, iser, we don't say that on different days there's different halachas. So Tajma, hey mismi shechetzi avid v'chetzi ben chayrin, if the shar kills somebody that's half an avid, half a ben chayrin, noisin chatzi knas l'rabbi, give 15 shkolim to Saba, the chatzi kaifer, and half of the kaifer, half of his value, we give it to Matisyo. The chatzi kaifer liyarshav. In this case, Matis Yosef's Yoshim. So the Gemara says, well, why don't we say it depends on which day? Amai hachanami leima yom shel rabbi l'rabbi yom shel atzmai la'atzmai. Says the Gemara, no. Shani hacha, it's different in the case of killing. See, the first case that we were clearing, we said the halacha was where the shar didn't kill him. It just damaged him. So if it damaged him, if it was on Sabbath's days, the damage goes to Saba. If it's on his own days, the damage goes to him. But over here, when you kill him, it's over. The principle is gone. Shani hacha, the kakal karna, since the principle is gone, so it has to be shared. So half goes to the master. In this case, it's 15 shkolim of the knas goes to Saba, and half of his value goes to the Yoshim. So the Gemara says, what's a case where it doesn't ruin the principle? If he damages him and he cuts off his hand, the principle is also lost. If he knocks off his foot, the principle is also lost. Says the Gemara, the shar gored him on his hand, and his hand withered, it shriveled, but but it's going to regenerate. So it's only a temporary damage. So the Gemara suggests then, if it's on Sabbath's day, it goes to Saba. If it's on his day, it goes to him. So the question though is that a shar doesn't pay hey dvarim. Adam Amazik pays hey dvarim. Nezek, tsar, ripuy, sheves, and boishus. Damages, medical, pain, unemployment, and humility. A shar doesn't pay. He only pays nezek. So, if it's for unemployment, there'll be no unemployment pay. Because the shar doesn't damage for unemployment. Because it says, that when a shar, when there's damage, there's two calculations. Let's say he was a baseball player for the New York Mets. This Eved. So first of all, he can't play baseball. That's Shevis Gedolah. And then there's Shevis Ketana. That's the unemployment that even when he can't play baseball, he could still teach chess. But while he's in bed, he can't even teach chess. So the Shevis Gedolah, that in the meantime, there's a hezek that he can't pitch for the New York Mets, that's considered nezek, and that even a shar would pay for. The Shevis Ketana, the unemployment that in the meantime he can't even teach chess when he's in bed, that would be Shevis, so then it's good. Because although a shar would be exempt from the Shevis Ketana, but he would be chayiv for the Shevis Gedolah. And it's not Kal Yakarna, because it's going to come back. And that's what he's saying, that if it's on Sabbath's day, Saba gets it. If it's on his own day, he gets it. We just calculate the unemployment of each day. Well, unemployment doesn't go to a shar. Hi sharu. He doesn't pay for the other four dvarim. He doesn't pay for unemployment. So the Gemara answers, Iba is saying in this case is not talking about where a shar did the damage. It's talking about an Adam did the damage. Kishikeu Adam. The Iba is or else we'll say that it's not a kasha because Memrahu, this is just a dictum, it's not a Mishnah or a Brisa. O memra l'Rava lo svirale, and this memra Rava doesn't hold of. Now, again, you know, we're already veterans in the tour through Shas. There are some Gemaras that are harder, that are more detailed than others. Others flow easier. And we should remember that when we learn the harder Gemaras, it's a night well spent. The Fumtsara Agra. When we have a night like this, Mark calls me up beforehand and he says, could we learn 2 of these black? I know. Not everybody is cut out for that, Mark. Not everybody. Yisrael says he's in Tannisville, he has the whole night. Now, Yisrael, how's the weather up there?
It just started to rain, but it's been cool. We just got up this morning.
I know that up in the mountains on Monday there was a hail the size of a half an inch. They had some real wild weather up there.
Our drive up had a lightning storm that was amazing. It was lighting up the sky.
Yeah, all right, amazing is not the word I would use for it, but okay. It's good if you could use such a word. Normally I would be up in the mountains already. I like to say it's still June, and I'm already up in the mountains. I like to say that, but Baruch Hashem, we're here in the beautiful Agudas Yisrael of Fairways. Ibaylahu. Mu'ukav get shichra. So here, look, you know, Shimon Klein, he's a lawyer, he knows from no shtick. He freed his whole slave. But he didn't give him yet a get shichra. Because he's working on the fine print. Now the shar gets, the slave gets gored. Does Shimon get the money? Yesh like knas or ain't like knas? Well, kesef shloishim shkalim yitin la'adaynav amarachmani. You give 30 shkalim to the master. V'hai lav adanu. Shimon's not his master anymore. He freed him. Oy dilma, perhaps came in the mechusar get shichra, since he's missing the get shichra. Adan karina bay. Maybe he's called the master. So Tajma, hey mismisha chetzi avid v'chetzi ben chayrin. If a shar gores somebody that's half an avid, half a ben chayrin, noisin chatzi knas l'rabbi, he gives half the knas to the master, the chatzi kaifer l'yoshev, and chatzi of the kaifer, because he's a half a free man, and when a sharmud kills a free man, he pays a ransom, he gives half of the kaifer to the yoshev. So my lav isn't this talking about Kamishna Achroina. Now, according to the Mishnah Achroina, he has to free the other half, because once he freed half, he has to free the other half. So technically, the slave doesn't have to work for him anymore. But yet we say he's entitled to half of the knas because he didn't give a get shechra. Says, well, like a Mishnah Rishayna, it's going according to the Mishnah Rishayna, where Beis Hillel says that Shimon doesn't have to free his half. So no raya yet. Tajma, hipale shinai. Now this is an interesting din in an Eved Kanani, that if you knock out his tooth or you blind his eye, he goes free. Not only that, but we'll see that he also goes free b'roshei evarim. That if you knock off the tips of his fingers, the tips of his toes, the tip of his nose, or the tip of his male organ, he goes free. So Tajma hipale shinai b'sima es eino yoytze b'shinai. If let's say you did both. Okay, Mark is taking Marshall's place. So Mark, in a fit of anger, somebody pronounced Bela Kinwood wrong, got very upset, and he knocked out his slave's tooth and blinded his eye. Whoa, Mark. I think anger management is called for. Yoitze b'shinai, he goes free because of the tooth, v'noisen tamei einai, and he gives him the value of his eye. But Mark didn't get a chance to write and get shecher yet. V'i amrit yesh lo knas uknas l'rabbi. If we say that there's a knas, and the knas goes to the master, so if somebody else would have knocked out his eye, it would go to Mark, and now when Mark does it, he has to pay him? Hashtar chavli be'achrina yovle l'rabbi would go to Mark because he didn't write to get shifcha. Chavel be'rabbi gufei, where Mark does it, yovle l'didei, he has to give it to the evet? That doesn't make sense. But we're assuming over here that where Mark knocks out a tooth, he has to write a get shechra. That's not so simple. Dilma kamandiyam ein etzarech. Maybe this is going according to the mandiyamar, that when you knock out a tooth or an eye, he goes free without a get shechra. The Tanya bekulan eved yotzaban lecheres. Whether you're mafker the eved or you're makdish him, and we say it means la'am kedei, he goes free. V'tzarech get shechra min rabbi. Needs to get shechra. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. Excuse me, I'm sorry. The Tanya bekulan, with all the Rashi Evarim, Shein, Ayin, tips of the fingers, Eved Yaitz Bem L'cheres, V'tzarech get shechra min rabbi, but he does need a writ of emancipation. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. Reb Meir Amein Etzarech. In this case, he goes free without a writ of emancipation. Rabbi Eliezer Etzarech, Reb Tarfon Amein Etzarech. Rabbi Kiva Etzarech. Rabbi Kiva says he needs it. Hamachriyan L'fnei Chachamim. Those that wanted to make a compromise in front of the Chacham struck a compromise as follows. Niran Divrei Rabbi Tarfon, it would be mashma like Rabbi Tarfon that he goes out and he doesn't need to get shechra b'shein v'ayin, where he knocks out the tooth or the eye, hoyel v'toira zichsalei, since the Torah was mezakeh to him. But v'divrei Rabbi Akiva that he needs to get shechra b'sharei varim, if he just cuts off his tips of his finger, his toes, his nose, hoyelu knas chachamimu, since that's a penalty of the chacham. So here the Gemara really reacts very harshly to this. A penalty of the chachamim? It's not a penalty of the chachamim. The Gemara will learn out that open blemishes that don't regenerate, like the tips of the hand, the tips of the toes, is learned out from a klal u'prat klal. A klal u'prat klal is one of the Yud Gimel Midas Shatar in the Dreshes Blam. It has a din of a doraisa. It's not a knas of a chachamim, says the Gemara, and therefore the Gemara reacts very strongly to that. Knas? That's not knas. Hokroi kadarshinan. We darshin psukim, a klal u'prat klal, generalization, specification, generalization. Elo ema hoyelu medrish chachamimhu. Now this is a very rare thing. You know, a lot of times we wonder what's the difference between something that's written beferish or we learn it out from a Kal V'chaimer. What's the difference between something that's written beferish and we learn it out from Gzeir Shava? So through Shas, we'll see that one of the differences is that Dover HaNidain Behekish Ein Chayzer Malamed. Something that was learned out from a Hekish, we cannot then compare it and learn it out from it. Something that's in Beferish in the Torah, we can learn out from it. But here the Gemara is giving us another very interesting difference. The Gemara is saying, Shein v'ayin, which the Torah writes beferish, that doesn't need to get shechra. The other Rashi Yevarim, which has to be learned out from a klal u'prat klal, that does need to get shechra. Very interesting difference. Ibaylahu. Wow, I can't believe the time it took me to prepare this daf. You would think that it would take me much longer to say it. I don't know, I must have been Speedy Gonzalez over here. Baruch Ian says he wants his money back. Sorry, Baruch. Sorry, it's COD. Sorry. Oh, it's interesting. We're missing Berish tonight. Ibaylahu. Mu'ukav get shichra. Here again, Shimon freed the slave, but he didn't give him a get shichra. Do we have any kohanim here tonight? No, huh? No Kohens. All right, we'll make Shimon a Kohen. Shimon a Kohen. It's, we know about the great Shimon a Kohen. So Shimon's a Kohen. Now, while the Eved is Shimon's, it's Kinyan Kaspai, and the Eved could eat Truma. What happens if Shimon frees him, but didn't give him a get shechra? Ibaylo, mu'ukav get shechra, if he was just missing a writ of emancipation, oichel b'truma ain't oichel. So the Gemara says, Kinyan kaspa yamarachmanai. It has to be purchased by money. V'hai lav kinyan kaspa. Since he doesn't have to work for Shimon anymore, he's not considered his monetary purchase. Oy Dilma, or perhaps he is. Look, Shimon paid good money for him, and since he didn't write a get shechra, he's still his technically. Oy Dilma came in the mechus to get shechra, Kinyan kaspa karina bay. He still has the label of Kinyan kaspa. So Toshma, the Hamara Misharshi, this is a famous case in Shas. Kohenes shenis arva vloda bevlad shivchas. Ay vey. She both Chani and Mary, Chani's slave, gave birth to Maimonides. And they mixed up the babies. So one of the babies is, Chani's son, and one of the babies is a Eved, Mary's son. So Hari Elu Eichlim B'Truma, they both could eat Truma, because, Chani is married to a Kohen, to Mr. Katz. So the one that's their son is Ben Kohen. It's a Kohen. And the one that's Mary's son is Kinyan Kaspai. So they can both eat Truma. When they go to the threshing floor, the two of them, we only give them one portion. Why? Because we assume yichus by somebody collecting at the geirin. Now one of them doesn't have yichus, one of them is a slave. One of them is a kohen. So we only give to the two of them one portion to show that they both don't have yichus. It's only one of them, we don't know which one. Now, Mr. Katz dies. So now, the boy that's the kohen inherits the boy that's the slave. We don't know which one inherits which. So higdilu ataravis, when they grow up, mishachrin zezeh, they free one another. One says, if I'm the kohen, I'm freeing you. And the other one says, if I'm the kohen, I free you. But what do we see? That until then, they both are allowed to eat truma. Now, they don't have to work, because each one could say, I'm not the slave. And even though they don't have to work, they could both eat truma. So we see that although they don't have to work, because they're missing shechra, they could both eat truma. Sigmar says no. Haki hashta. Hasam over there. Im yovi Eliyahu v'yomer b'chad minayo de'evidu. If Eliyahu would come and say, look, you're the Kohen and you're the Eved, so the Kohen would be able to eat Truma because he's a Kohen, and the Eved would be able to eat Truma because he's a Kinyan Kaspai. Kinyan Kaspai Karina Bay. But over here, Shimon already freed the slave, so Hacha Lav Kinyan Kaspu Klal. We're going to stop over here, Rabbi Isai. A very, very, very detailed and long Gemara. Bravo to everybody for sticking it out. The Gemara will get easier. We will have, by the way, a Chumash Shir tomorrow night, so stay tuned for that. Broadcasted here in the Good Israel of Fairways. You could always pick it up on zoomdaf.com about 9:30 after the daf. We're going to learn the Mishnah Yomis now, and thank you for joining us.
Rabbi, thank you.
Thank you.
How often do we have the Gemara saying, it's not a Mishnah, it's not a Brisa, it's just a memory?
Not very often. Not very often.
Don't say Shabbos is here?
Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. A big change from what I thought it would be, but I'm very glad to be here.